I am an expression of the Spirit, of the Spirit. I am an expression of the Spirit, of the Spirit. A beautiful expression of the Spirit, of the Spirit. Magnificent expression of the Spirit, of the Spirit. A unique, unrepeatable expression of God. A unique, unrepeatable expression of God. I am an expression of the Spirit, of the Spirit. I am an expression of the Spirit, of the Spirit. Right time, right place. An expression of the Spirit. I'm fabulous. I got it. An expression of the Spirit. A unique, unrepeatable expression of God. I'm a unique, unrepeatable expression of God. I am an expression of the Spirit, of the Spirit. I am an expression of the Spirit, of the Spirit, of the Spirit.
Well, as we've already told you, our guest speaker this morning is Reverend Gregory Toole. He has a long list of history and accomplishments. You might expect that from a man who has written a simple guide to transforming planet Earth. He's got to have some capacities, you know, so I suspect that he has a lot of history that got him to that place. Anyway, Reverend Gregory is currently the Director of Member Support and Education for the Centers for Spiritual Living headquarters group up in Genesee, Golden, Colorado. He leads in that role lots of different responsibilities, serving the centers, practitioners, ministers, including education, licensing, credentialing, youth, field services, global services, world ministry of prayer, and the practitioner and minister councils. I don't know what anyone else up there must be doing, you know, it's amazing. Anyway, we're delighted that he finds time in that busy schedule to be here with us this morning. So please join me in welcoming Reverend Gregory.
Thank you, and what a delight it is to be here. How wonderful it is to be at Center for Spiritual Living, Castle Rock. I have had the opportunity to work with your core council over the last year and attend a service or two, and what a lovely community. You know, we had a opportunity to explore where the community is, you know, as we were, as your minister was leaving and looking at next steps, and I got to just be in the room with some members of the community and just kind of feel into it. And I get to work with a lot of communities, so I kind of can be a pretty quick read on where communities are. And what a beautiful energy was in the room there. And I said to them, and some of them giggled a little bit, I said, wow, this is great. You guys are really in love with each other. You know, you guys really like each other. This is great. So that makes the road much easier going forward when love is at the core and you like each other and there's a clear energy and a clear space to move forward, even if transition is usually difficult for us humanly. When you have it grounded in love and you have that mutual respect, really paves the way. So I congratulate you all on the community that you have created and are creating here. Happy St. Patrick's Day, by the way. And as all of you have heard, my name is Gregory Toole. And many times, even though people will hear that, they will call me Gregory O'Toole. And the good news is that today, if you make that mistake, it's the one day that I say it's okay. It's the one day I say you can call me Gregory O'Toole. So, well, what a joy it is to be here. And I have to say that you all are the first community that I am speaking to about my new book. It was launched just a few weeks ago in Vancouver at the Centers for Spiritual Living convention, and I did a book signing there, but I have not, this is the first group that I am coming out to speak to about it, and so you all are sort of my inaugural group here. And the title was very intentional, A Simple Guide to Planetary Transformation, and I have books back there, and I'll be happy to sign them, and I can even swipe credit and debit cards if you like. And this book really, this was a 5-year project. It was supposed to be a 1-year project, but Spirit had other plans and had a path to bringing this book forward, so that it wasn't just a project. It was Spirit's working with me and through me to bring forth very intentionally, the word simple in there is very intentional. It is, what I did is I did a lot of counseling with people. You know, people would come to me as a practitioner, as a minister, and I did a lot of counseling. And of course, I did a lot of work on myself, most importantly. And I worked with a lot of people, and I taught a lot of classes, and I said, what is it? What is it that if we individually healed in ourselves and cleared in ourselves, that would transform the planet? Because I really believe that you really can't change the world, you know, but you can change yourself, and by changing yourself, you do change the world. But we really can't, like, go out and change the world. We can only change what's right here. And so I really looked at all the things that people come to me about, and all the things I worked on in myself, and all the things that came up as we taught classes. And I said, what if we healed individually each one of those things? What if, I always have to have water up here. What if we each individually healed those things and cleared those things in our being? And that's what this book is about. This book is about going one by one to all the things that hinder us, to all the things that block us, to all the things that hold us back, and freeing ourselves up from those things. And so there's writing about it in principles, and then there's exercises and work to do, practice, to move us through all of that. And one of the beautiful things that any of you who have taken classes or set an intention for yourself, one of the beautiful things that we all know and we all have experienced is when you set an intention, you know, when you say, I set an intention to be more loving, what happens? What happens when you set an intention to be more loving? Like you're going to be the picture of love. Well, the first thing that happens is everything that looks unlike love shows up in your life and in your being. And you're walking and you're see aspects of yourself, and then you say, oh my God, that was so unloving, and yet I set this intention to be loving. Well, in writing this book and in in the beginning stages of launching it, all kinds of things have been showing up for me to be healed. And of course, why should I talk to others about a simple guide to planetary transformation and how powerful we are by transforming ourselves unless I am on that path too? And so it's been all manner of things that have come up that aren't even things I thought I was working on, you know? And yet it's beautiful. I was thinking about how difficult over these last couple weeks it must be to live with me. You know, because just all of it was coming up, and I was sitting there and I was, you know, okay, that's the work. That's the work, is to clear that, is to get in touch with that, is to clear that. So I want to talk to you today about one aspect of the book, one chapter in the book on freedom. And freedom for me it's got to be my favorite quality, my favorite virtue, and I think it's probably our number one value as Americans. You know, freedom is a big deal for us. We love freedom. And this teaching, of course, you know, as Foster read one of the quotes from Dr. Ernest Holmes, this teaching is so anchored in freedom. Our freedom to express, our freedom to create, our freedom to be who we are. And it's my favorite thing. It's my favorite thing to know, to be really free, to really know that we can create the life we want to create. And those are just words, right? But to really feel into that I can create the life I want to create and I can create the world I want to create, is profound and powerful. So a couple of things that I want to talk about around freedom. One is that it's our nature. Freedom is our nature. We're meant to be free. We're meant to be fully expressed. And we know that at some level of our being, because when we're not free, something really doesn't feel right to us. One of the things, in order for us to really be free, is that we have to release our bonds on others. Have to release our bonds on others, because every person that we hold in bondage, we hold ourselves in bondage. So I want to read a passage from the book, and if you wonder what I'm doing up here, by the way, my whole talk is on my iPad here in a little mind map, so I'm kind of moving it around the screen to read things here. I'm nearly paperless, except for it's a little ironic that I've come out with a paper book because I don't even have a paper file cabinet in my office. I literally don't have a file cabinet. So people bring me paper and I say, what am I supposed to do with this? Email it to me or something like that. So let me read something from the book here about bondage. It says, we can't hold others in bondage and simultaneously be free ourselves. What we want for ourselves, we must give to others and celebrate in them. Celebrate any time you see someone experiencing the type of freedom you wish to experience. Whether friend or foe, celebrate it as a demonstration to you that it's possible for you. Can we do that? Like even if it's someone we don't like and we see that they've created something that we want to create. I had that experience actually. It was a beautiful experience, and it had to do with writing a book, because I've wanted to write a book for a long time. And I had this vision of me walking into a coffee shop and someone I didn't know was sitting there reading my book. And I just got so excited about that. I said, that would be so cool to like walk into a coffee shop and someone's sitting there reading my book. And a acquaintance of mine, whom, let's just say we weren't quite friends. Let's just say anyone have those people in your life that somehow you're really here to help each other grow? And that we just had this kind of thing. I mean, we couldn't even explain it by anything that had happened, and we eventually healed it. But we had this thing that we just clashed all the time. Well, she wrote a book. And I was in a coffee shop one day, and there was someone reading her book. And I couldn't help but be happy, because this, to me, if I wasn't happy, then I wasn't happy for my own demonstration. because it was my demonstration, even though it wasn't my book yet, it was someone I knew well enough that it was a demonstration to me that this is possible. And so I celebrate it for her. And while I was in Vancouver, it wasn't the exact experience, but I was standing in a line and I was holding my book. And someone came up to me and said, "Hey, what are you reading?" And I said, "I am reading this wonderful book. And the author is amazing." So we have to free others. And I traveled to South Africa in 1994. And that was about 4 years after apartheid officially ended. It was actually, I arrived the week before Mandela was elected, and I was there for the 2 weeks, the week before he was elected and the week after. And they were still smarting from years of this apartheid system, of really oppressive system. And it was such an example to me of how, it was a first-hand example of how we can't hold others in bondage and be free ourselves. Because what had happened is, over time with apartheid, I mean, what we read about is that apartheid ended because it was an unjust system and it was wrong. But that's only part of the story. A huge reason that it ended is because everyone there was in bondage. Everyone. I'll illustrate this for you. There was a British couple that we were staying with, and they had this routine that they would go through whenever we arrived back at their home, no matter how long we were staying. Like, we could go out and we were just going home to get a sweater because it was going to be cooler in the evening, and we were just going to just pop in and get a sweater and get right back out, get in the car and go back out again. They still did their routine. The routine was bring the car into the driveway, lock the gate with a lock and a chain, and go in the house. And so, you know, we come home just to get a sweater. I mean, we're going in the house for 2 minutes. You know, they go through the routine. They lock the gate. They go through all kinds of things to protect the car. I'm thinking, gosh, this is like ridiculous. Is this really necessary? One day, we came home, and it was a really quick stop, and they didn't put the chain on. We came back outside. The car was broken into. I said, aha, I get it. That's one of the reasons why apartheid ended. Everyone there was in bondage because you couldn't keep one group in bondage without ultimately, eventually, becoming in bondage yourself, themselves. It was such a clear example to me. I want to talk a little bit about confronting our fears. Anyone here have any fears? Few people? Most of you don't? You look very courageous, so I... Confronting our fears is another necessary aspect of being free. It's really hard to be free if we're living in a great deal of fear all the time. Not to say that we don't have some fear, but if we're living in fear all the time, and fear really guides us and is the overarching thing in our lives, it's very difficult to be free. So we have to work on fear. And I'll read something from my book about fear, and it's a metaphor that came to me that really worked for me. And so it might be even a practice for you as well as you hear this. And it's a way to work with fear. It says, consider this metaphor. A being called fear knocks at the door of a one-room house. I answer the door. Okay, pause with me for 1 second. This is a new phenomenon for me here. This is a new thing going on in my life here. That I now go to restaurants. I now carry these around when I go to restaurants. This is brand new, I tell you. Okay. So I answer the door rather than resist this being called fear. I welcome fear to come in the house. See, I don't know how to work with these here. I don't like to look at you with them on. Okay, we're going to work with this here. So I walk fear across the room, all the while speaking lovingly to it. Welcome back, fear. What brings you this way again? You know I have nothing against you, but I don't base my life on you anymore. So you are welcome to visit, but not welcome to stay here. Then I gently and lovingly guide fear across the room and out the door on the other side. It is a metaphor for how we may experience the sensation of fear in our bodies. It rises from somewhere, perhaps the pit of our stomach, and rather than pushing it down, we allow it to rise and pass through us. Without our resistance, fear becomes a momentary experience, not something we live with constantly. Oftentimes, I think, and I know this has been my experience, because fear is such an unpleasant sensation, we try to push it down. We don't want to feel it, so we try to push it down. But the more we push it down, it's kind of like a balloon. You know, you push a balloon down and then it kind of comes up somewhere else. So we can work with fear because fear is something that seems to be part of the human experience, and yet it doesn't have to have power over us. It's something that can kind of momentarily pass through us. I'm just remembering a silent Buddhist meditation retreat I did, and they called it anicca. I'll never forget that, because while we were deep in meditation, the teacher would say, anicca, anicca, anicca. And it was a reminder that things rise and then they pass. They rise and then they pass. And they only stay when we don't allow them to rise and pass. So if we try to push them down, they don't rise, but they also don't pass. So I leave that with you as well. Anicca, anicca, anicca. They rise and they pass. Recently, in January, I had the beautiful opportunity to go to Peru. So far on my job, every 2 years, and maybe I want to try to make it every year, but every 2 years I've traveled on a beautiful international trip. In 2009, I went to Russia and Ukraine to visit our centers there and give some talks there. In 2011, I went to Geneva to do some workshops and give some talks there. And in January, I went to Peru. We have several. Centers for Spiritual Living has 4 teaching chapters in Lima, Peru. And I went there and we paneled 21 new practitioners in Lima. And while I was there, of course I was there mostly on business, but at the end I tacked on a couple more days and I went to Machu Picchu. Beautiful place, you know, the Incan ruins there, great history, great spiritual tradition of the Incans. And while I was there, one of my fears, if you will, sort of one of those ones I came into this life with and that I still work with, is around heights. Somehow, it like literally physically throws off my equilibrium. Like if I would tell people if I were standing on something even this high, I would be like, whoa, you know, like somehow that throws me off. Well, I'm in Machu Picchu and one of my coworkers really helped me out. She said, oh, by the way, I know a friend who went to Machu Picchu and fell off a cliff and died, so be careful. I said, oh, well, thank you very much. But I didn't think very much of it. I thought, okay, I'm not going to go there. I'm sure it's very safe and everything. Well, we went up there, and it's just all of this wide open expanse, spaciousness. And first they say, well, first, you know, what you should do first is go up the trail and go look over top of Machu Picchu, which is already rather high altitude. And so we hike up here, and it's not really dangerous, but for me, with my fear of heights, it's a real challenge. Because even though there's, you know, 5-6 feet of room where, you know, that you're not going to like fall off very easily, with the fear of heights, it's just there. It was very present. But I'm working with it because I'm like, I'm in Machu Picchu. I am not going to miss this. And I'm working with the fear, and I'm working with the fear, and I'm doing this exercise, you know, let it rise and let it pass, you know. And so, you know, so I was okay, and I was kind of clinging a little bit to the mountain, you know, like, because other people who didn't have fear of heights, including my partner, Cindy, it's almost like she's the opposite. She'll be standing right on the edge of a cliff like this and just be talking and not even give it a second thought. And I'm like, sweetheart, come back. Get away from that cliff. And I'm kind of hugging the mountain instead of the cliff on the side here. And our guide, you know, he was very perceptive. He was very steeped spiritually. He came from a long line of Incan healers, which is a whole other story about how we ended up with this guide who was the perfect guide for us. But he noticed, you know, and eventually he chuckled a little bit and said, oh, I see you're a little afraid of heights, because I was kind of, always had one hand on the mountain as the cliff was over there. And so he's guiding us through, and he says, okay, how would you like to do this next part? We can either go this way, which is this really steep climb, or we can go over here. We're going over here. So he takes us to kind of make the story a little shorter. He takes us and he says, I'm going to take you somewhere that very few people get to go. I'm going to take you to the Crystal Cave, because you know, he really sensed that we were receptive to, he was doing prayers the whole way through, which he would not normally be doing on a tour, but he sensed that, like, we never talked about where we were spiritually. He just picked it up. And so he takes us to this one part where there's about 3 feet worth of walkway. About 3 feet of walkway, and I'm kind of like, okay, I am doing this, you know, and I walk out there and we're in this cave, and I'm like, okay, I did it. You know, I transcended the fear. And we're in this cave for a little while, and we're talking, and he's sharing with us the significance of it. And then he says, I said, so is this the Crystal Cave? And he says, oh, no, this isn't the Crystal Cave. The Crystal Cave is around there. Well, now we're talking 1.5 feet of space with a drop off. And in my mind said, okay, am I going to do this? And I said, yes. And so there we were, and I'm still kind of keeping a hand on the mountain there, and I just kind of moved through it, and it's rising and it's passing. And it was the most beautiful experience. There was and this is an ancient Incan thing, there was a masculine meditation chair and a feminine meditation chair. And my partner and I each took our respective chairs, and we sat down and we meditated. And he did these beautiful prayers while we meditated. And it was just an example to me of just kind of being with the fear and just moving through it. And then he said, okay, now I'm going to teach you how to fly. And that one I left for next time. I said, next time. Because what that meant is he literally went out onto the edge. There was a rock about this wide that went out about, 3 or 4 feet over the cliff. And he walked out onto there, and he spread his arms out, and he closed his eyes, and he just stood there. And I'm talking a wide open expanse, several 100 feet drop. And he turned to me and he said, your turn. And I said, next time. Transcended enough fear for one day. But I tell you that story to say that fear is usually a part of our human experience, but it doesn't have to have power over us or rule us. And in order to be free, in order for me to experience that beautiful experience of being in that crystal cave, and one of the things we did after we meditated is he had us put our crown chakras against the crystal, and we were standing like this looking out into the wide expanse, and we closed our eyes and he did more prayer. And it was one of the most beautiful experiences of the whole trip. But fear had to be transcended in order, it had to allow it to rise and to pass in order to have that great experience. Finally, I want to talk to you about love. Because love is the place for us to stand where we're ultimately in freedom. And when I was given the vision 5 years ago or so, 6 years ago probably, to write this book and the work that was to come with it, it really scared the heck out of me because the vision seemed too big. It seemed it was about my role that I was to play in creating world peace. And I thought, no, I didn't think. There was no thinking involved. It was just, it overwhelmed me. It just felt overwhelming, so much so that I was going to do a workshop and a talk at one of our larger centers in Santa Rosa, California, Center for Spiritual Living Santa Rosa. And their sanctuary seats about 600 people. And so it's a pretty significant venue. And I had told them I was going to do a workshop, and they said, okay, if you're going to do a workshop, write us the description of the workshop. I couldn't sit down to write the description of the workshop. That's how overwhelming it felt. I couldn't even write it down because it felt like if I wrote it down, it was going to be real, and I was going to have to do it. And I remember sitting at my keyboard, and I couldn't type it. And eventually what overtook me was love. Eventually what overtook me was that, everything I feared was what I didn't want to happen. And love pointed the way to say, I'm willing. I'm willing to be this vessel. I'm willing to be this instrument. I'm willing to be this beneficial presence on the planet. I don't know how, and I don't know what it will require of me, but I'm willing. And I have no responsibility for how anyone else receives it or accepts it. Like, my job would be to write the book. And then I have no responsibility as to whether anyone likes it or how they receive it. However, I'm surrendered to Spirit and trusting that if Spirit is calling me to bring this forth, then there must be great good involved, but that's not my part. My part was to be the instrument. And so love is the place we're being called to stand in. I want to read you a quote from the book again on love. It's very short. It says, love is our essence. Love will heal us. Love will free us. And love will heal our planet. Love prevails. If we stand in love, love prevails. And we don't have to know how, but love does prevail. So I want to close with that love prevails. And I want to thank you all for being a beneficial presence on the planet. And I want to thank you for your spiritual practice and your spiritual work, because it is felt and experienced. Like I said, when I sat in that living room at Art Morales' house, I could feel the love. I could feel the spiritual practice that you all are doing. So thank you for being a beneficial presence on the planet. And let's turn within for prayer for a moment.